Sure. Thank you, Sadishna. So again, good evening to all the folks, logged in late from India and across the world, and good afternoon to folks from US. So I mean, as part of the Vita Alumni Association, we are proud to have a special speaker, with us today. So we would like to introduce Professor Deva Rangarajan, who is going to, speak with us on the topic of sales skills or life skills. So just to give a quick introduction about Professor Deva Rangarajan. So he is an associate professor of marketing and the director of the Center for Professional Selling at Ball State University, Indianapolis. And he is also Vita Distinguished Alumni Award winner. So we're very proud, that he is a Vita, award winner. And Professor Deva Rangarajan is an associate professor of marketing. And as I said, he's also the director of a Center for Professional Selling. And he has bachelor's in mechanical engineering from VIT, yes, and a PhD in marketing from the University of Houston. And he spent 14 years as a professor at Vlerick Business School in Belgium. He has also taught at University of Cologne, Bocconi, Italy and India, and Gordon Institute of Business Studies in South Africa. So he has worked closely with many companies to consult and deliver customized programs. The list of multinational companies, there's a big list of multinational companies that he has worked with, but I'll just read out a few. So Yanmar, Epiroc, Atlas, Schneider Electric, Siemens, Philip, Johnson & Johnson, and the list goes on. I don't want to be going through every company. He's worked for a lot of companies, and he has also published in various international peer-reviewed journals like Business Horizons, California Management Review, Industrial Marketing Management, Information Management, Journal of Business and Industrial Marketing, Journal of Business Research, and Rutgers Business Reviews. His main areas of research include Salesforce effectiveness, digital transformation of business, and customer experience management. So with this, I would like to, hand it over to Professor Deva to take over the session. And just a few housekeeping items, as Satish already highlighted. Please go on mute, if you're just listening. And when you have questions, of course, you can feel free to put it in the chat box. And I think we'll take the questions, once Professor Deva Rangarajan is done with the session, I believe, right? So I mean, whatever works for you, sir. So hand it over to Professor Deva.
Yeah. Thank you, Arun, for this wonderful introduction as well. Again, the Vita sounds much more kind of sophisticated and accomplished than actually what I've actually done in my life. So thank you for that opportunity. I want to thank Satish for thinking about me, and also for the VIT associations and wherever it is, and most importantly for the founder of VIT who's made it what it is. I remember my time in 1996 when at that time I was naive. I did not truly understand the dream that our founder had at that point in time. And to see it grow and where it is right now to where we are right now, talking to alumni from different parts of the world. And so essentially that's amazing. Of course, heartfelt thanks to all the alumni who are tuning in. I see a couple of my classmates, Satish being one, Meena being not my classmate, but being from the same time that I graduated with VS is Satish. I see some names that I'm assuming are people with whom I graduated with. And for the others, thank you so much. And I know that your time is precious. I know that at this time, many of you are facing difficult situations. Gopi from Math, 1995, essentially, yes. So I see that a lot of my old classmates and people are there here as well. So essentially, I know that these are difficult times, and trust me when I actually see a lot of my young students right there who have gotten jobs, and then suddenly the company comes back and has said that, unfortunately, because of all the situation happening right now, they've actually had to put or freeze new hiring while they try to make sense of how they can get their existing people working. So when I get these requests with a couple of business schools and a couple of companies right now, which are asking me to talk about how can we make sure that our people feel that they should be doing the best to out there in terms of taking care of their customers, staying relevant in their careers, And when I was doing all this, out of the blue, in comes Satish talking about doing this session. So what I'm going to share with you, when Satish and I were discussing about what kind of topics can I kind of discuss about, and the answer is yes, there are many things that I can of course talk about, and it could mean different things for different people. So what we decided was that we will take it along the following things. So essentially, I remember my journey, and I think that's one of the things I remember when I finished my mechanical engineering. And at that point in time, after doing all this, I had a father. I still have a father who was actually a general manager of production in a company, and he was a mechanical engineering too, mechanical engineer too. So, and I remember distinctly telling him that I was actually thinking about taking up a job in sales as a sales engineer. And my dad at that point in time looks at me and says, so you are not good enough to get into any of the R&D, or you could not get into any one of the other wonderful disciplines in an organization. The idea being that I did not spend all that money for you to actually go into sales. And this was actually pretty interesting when that was the case. And I thought to myself, but you know what? At that point in time, I will take whatever job I can get. And to this date, transitioning from an engineering background into a job in sales has been one of the best decisions that I have made, because till that point in time, it was mostly decisions that were made for me by my parents and whatever gifts that were given to me. But it was at that point in time where I could actually make a choice. And I must admit that the first choice I made to go into sales was mostly because I just wanted a job. I just wanted to get out and get a job and maybe earn some money. But in hindsight, it has been one of the best decisions of my life, because it was because of sales that I ended up working in a company that I made enough money to apply for GRE when I wanted to go study abroad. It made it very clear that I wanted to study something in sales. So when I ended up in Houston, University of Houston, they were setting up a sales program. So I ended up studying that. And then I thought to myself, seeing a little bit of life in the US, why not see life in Europe? And once I moved to Europe, to this date, I've made the single biggest sale of my life. That is to actually sell myself to my wife, where I had to tell her exactly why she had to choose me over all the other people that she came in contact with. So my single biggest sale and my key account to date, only key account to date, is my wife of around 10 years right now. And I've had some wonderful experiences. So essentially what started out was just like, I just want to take a job, has led to a lot of meaningful relationships in my life. And so from that viewpoint, I'm going to share with you some of the insights that I want to do. And my insights are much more, I do realize that some of you might be in sales, or some of you have been in sales. Again, I know that some of you are my classmates, but some of you might have graduated maybe 10 years ago. Some of you are more recent graduates. So essentially, it's very hard to come up with content in an hour that is going to be relevant to all. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to try and share with you some insights from the viewpoint of what I hear daily. And I'm going to begin with kind of what can you learn from sales that you can apply. It does not matter if you're a young recruit, or you've just started your career in an organization, or you happen to be an entrepreneur where you have a small team of people, or you happen to be in a middle management level where you're thinking about pivoting, or you're in very difficult situations right now where you have to work from home and you have to stay relevant to your community, to your stakeholder community. Stakeholder for me would be your peers, your bosses, supervisors, your colleagues, your colleagues, your bosses, your customers, most importantly. And of course, again, I know that yesterday you had a wonderful session with actually a psychologist. So essentially, he must have talked a lot about work-family balance as well. So I'm going to restrict myself. I'm not an expert on the aspect of how you manage your internal household. But the idea is I can definitely talk about what can we learn, and irrespective of whatever career stages you are in, right? Let's again, the idea is that if you happen to be gainfully employed, okay, in some cases just employed at this point in time, you're not furloughed, or you're not being put on, what kind of administrative leave, that kind of stuff. And I think the key aspect in during these times is, one thing is, how do I communicate? Absolutely. So I think Arun mentioned it. It's a lesson for everybody. How do I communicate during these difficult times? Of course, gone are the days. Yesterday, I was watching a show on Netflix about life in 1980s, and I saw a Facebook meme that said, you know what, if this had happened 15 years ago, we would have been stuck with one of those old Nokia 100 phones where you would have a 100-minute limit and you can only take so many calls at any particular point in time. Forget checking emails, you would have to be doing dial-up internet. So imagine that at least we are not in those stages. So which means that communicating right now is becoming something that is extremely critical, because communication is one way by which you stay relevant and you stay on top of mind. But communication does not mean that you should communicate for the sake of communicating, because then it becomes noise. Because essentially what it is that today, when everybody's trying to communicate with everybody else, the question is, if I want to communicate, how do I make sure that for the time that the other person is going to give us their attention, how do we make that count? And that does not always have to be with something that's got to do with work. It's got something to do how you can connect with them personally. And by the way, everything that I'm saying right now, it's not rocket science. It's just that something that we've forgotten. And we have had the day-to-day grind every time, that we have to go back to the basics and say, we have to make sure that we have to connect. The biggest thing that we have to connect with right now is showing empathy with your fellow colleagues who are probably going through difficult times. And it could be that, yes, you're on the same job together, you're facing difficult times, but imagine that you happen to have a colleague who has other issues just apart from work. Now is the time for you to learn to empathize. And that is something that salespeople at least are supposed to do, is empathize with your customers. But how is it with the fact that your external customers are any different from your internal customers? So for a salesperson, any salesperson worth their salt would be a great empathizer, or the great, what we say is emotional quotient, EQ, or emotional intelligence, is they can communicate with their customers. But we all know that if you're in sales, you need to as well communicate and empathize with your customers. But for you to make sure that you promise and you deliver on those promises to the customers, you need the support of your internal colleagues. So which means that the more you can empathize and communicate with your internal colleagues, the more you're going to be successful. And this, by the way, is something that anybody in any profession today is what you need to do. You need to start connecting back with your colleagues and start empathizing with them. But the question is, if I'm going to be empathizing with my other colleagues, what do I empathize with some people that I've not talked to in a long time? And this is something that I learned from one of my business contacts I was talking to, and he said something very interesting. He'd read a great book on negotiation from a professor at Wharton in the United States, where apparently the key part of negotiating or connecting with the person that you're negotiating with is find a common enemy. That is very, very interesting, because what's going to happen is when you connect with a common enemy, it's not you against the other, it's together we are dealing with something that's beyond us. And luckily for us, COVID could be that enemy. Your ability to build your relationships and connections, by the way, is going to help you now. But more importantly, let's face it, from everybody that I talk to, is this crisis is going to be over. When it is going to be over, the only capital that is going to be relevant to you is your relationship capital. It is the relationships that you build, both internally to your organization, within your organization, as well as with your customers. So show empathy. And when you want to show empathy, make sure that a big first step towards that is find common ground or find common enemies. And that is something that will really, really help you. But again, don't forget that this can also help you with your customers. For those of you who are in sales, or for those of you who are in a job, which I'll talk about later on, which I cannot stress enough, are in customer success, this aspect of connecting with your customers and talking about a common enemy is going to show that you're in the same boat together. It's not one against the other. That is something that I really think that you need to be thinking about during these difficult times. And the next thing which I wanted to say, of course, is respect. What do I mean by that is, now is a time, especially when you are either in a situation where it is untenable, it is difficult, Some of you might be stuck. If you're young enough to be watching this and you don't have kids, then great. At least that is one thing that you don't have to be concerned about, is making sure that you do not mess up with the psyche of your kids just because you're all stuck in enclosed spaces. So now is the time for you to actually try and say is that if you are in those kind of situations, is you're going to be thrown into a lot of things together. There could be a lot of anxiety, and the way you write and the way you communicate with your colleagues right now is going to say a lot about how much respect you show to them. These are small things, but that is something you should write your letters to your colleagues the way you write them to your customers. Because guess what? Once this is over, people are going to have long memories. And again, these are the kind of things that we have to talk about. These are mostly communication part, right? It's show empathy, show respect to the people, find common ground. And then, of course, once we do this, understand that everybody's time is valuable. So you should be talking about how I should be creating value and how I should be making sure that the time that I spend with them is that they take something away from it. And that something away from it need not be something that they can make money with or something. It's about also something showing support to them. Value could mean different things. Value, especially during these times, is that how do I empathize? How do I make sure that, hey, I leave you with the feeling that you're not alone. I am here. You can count on me for emotional support. That's the best thing that you could do. If you can monetarily support them, great. Give them some money. But if not, emotionally support them and be there for them. And that is something that I really think that when you think about this, these sort of things that I'm talking about is not just relevant for your customers, also for your colleagues internally. And hey, and you do this well, you are in some way or the other creating capital, and you will be able to work better. Now, of course, I'm saying all this not with a purely altruistic sense. It's also got to do with the fact that the more you build these connections, the more these connections can come and help you out. You build these connections, you do a great job of communicating, your customers can become your best vocal advocates. You do this, you become an integral part of your team, where your team realizes that you are an integral part. Your supervisors can see that you're well connected internally. And if you're well connected internally, if I want to make sure that if I ever have to furlough somebody, I at least want to make sure that I keep those guys in who are the glue. When I mean guys and girls. They are the glue that holds people together. That's people with the connections. And that is something that is going to help you a lot. And communication is key to all that. Right? Now, if you've done this, the question is that all of these are things that we can actually do. Now, we might have to ask ourselves is, how do we stay current? How do we ask ourselves what kind of skills? So the first one was about communication. The next set of things that I want to talk about is what kind of skills should I be developing to stay relevant? Now, this is a lot more tricky. By the way, as soon as I finish talking, but please, if those of you who are in sales, not in sales, if you have specific questions, please do ask your questions, because the most difficult thing for me here is not exactly knowing how many people are in sales, how many people are not in sales, how many people are in early stages of their career, how many people are in middle management, or those kind of things. So I'm just going to say general things. But once I get a kind of a perspective on what situation you're in, I can even tailor my kind of answers according to that. But I'm just going to say, what are some skills? So what are some skills that are relevant out here? The first one, which is becoming very, very, very interesting right now, is the concept of omni-channel communication. Omni-channel communication is that gone are the days when you just think there's one particular channel by which you can communicate. I'm sure that for those of you, and I'm assuming that most of you here on Zoom, so essentially what you've seen is that in the past, if you do not interact on Zoom or Microsoft Teams or heaven forbid WebEx, sorry if you have WebEx, or any of those kind of things that you have, what you will start realizing is that you will have to start to learn to communicate through different channels, through different platforms. Sometimes your job is made easy because your organization might force you to work on this, but you will have to learn to understand how to communicate with different stakeholders or different audiences. How you have to make sure that when you do this, how do I make sure that I am to the point and talking about relevant things? That is something you really have to do and understand. Omni-channel for me is also how can I leverage social media? And please note, when I'm talking about social media, is how do I make myself relevant by looking at posting content that is creating value for my, again, you'll notice a lot of what I say is about value. So essentially the idea of using your social media, developing a presence there is extremely critical. When I'm talking also about for those of you who are not necessarily in sales, but being active in your enterprise social media. So you might have heard things like Slack, or you might use Microsoft Teams, or if you can take a look at all of these kind of platforms. If you are using Salesforce, you might be using Chatter. Cisco might be Jabber. So essentially, whatever you want to use, be active there. Enterprise social media is a great way for you also to make, or some of you might even have Facebook for work. So depending upon whatever you use, make sure that you're active there, not active just for the sake of being active, but where you are providing content or useful information, and learn to communicate. This is how sometimes you're going to be seen as well, right? But of course, be very, very careful when you do that. And I don't have to tell most of you is that stay away from political things. Again, talk about work, talk about how you can do the job better, how can you do things together better. That's what I would talk about in terms of learning to sell through omnichannel. If you happen to be in digital, if you happen to be in sales, learning to sell digitally is something that you really have to learn to do right now, because this might become the norm. And also for those of you who are in marketing or are considering a move towards marketing or even customer success or other kind of roles, digital skills for me is also understanding. Right now, there's a bunch of platforms which can actually help you communicate better with your customers. So ask yourself, should I be getting new skills like getting certified in certain aspects of, let's say, for example, digital marketing, or getting something in terms of marketing automation, or getting something on something like account-based marketing, or getting certified on things like social selling. A great resource would be HubSpot. HubSpot, HUBSPOT, is a great source where they offer a lot of certification. Try to get certified. Or go to Salesforce, and Salesforce has Trailhead, TRAILHEAD. Even if you're not in sales, getting certified here is something that's very, very interesting. What you might not know is that when you go take something on Trailhead, you have to create your own profile, which sometimes is visible to the people who are actually looking at this. And sometimes if your profile is good, you may just get picked up by that. Interestingly, for you, those of you who are looking at Salesforce, you might have noticed that there was a recent statement by Benioff that said for the next 90 days, they're not going to lay off people. So they're not only are they strong companies, but again, they have the right kind of tools and skills that you can actually pick up free of cost. And yes, it is an investment of time, but you're making yourself future-proof, right? And the nice thing is, if you go to HubSpot has a HubSpot Academy, and there they have a lot of certification on different aspects of commercial skill sets and everything else. So essentially for you to become digital. So this is mostly relevant for those of you who are just graduating 4 or 5 years, are looking to pivot and things like that. This would be a great source. And by the way, again, I'm sure that in many organizations there have been layoffs or things put on freeze. But guess in most organizations, which is the job that most of the time gets laid off last? Apart from, of course, CEOs and CFOs and CXOs, it's mostly salespeople, because you have to fight to bring the last order in. And by that definition, any other role which is involved in trying to bring business back within the organization as well. So again, getting these digital skills and using this time to get that is going to be fantastic for you to actually help you there as well. And for those of you who are saying, you know what, customer facing roles are not for me, or even marketing kind of thing might not necessarily be for me. But of course, if you have a feeling towards doing more and more data analytics, just before this, I was talking to a bunch of friends, and I was told by one of the alumni from 1996, a guy by the name of Prasanna Venkatesh, who actually said, hey, you talk about this, but today data is the new oil. And he was talking about the fact that how today, most of these organizations that you're going to be working with, even if you're in a manufacturing space, you're going to have Internet of IoT. what is
Internet of
Things? Sorry,
Yeah.
man,
Yeah.
you would imagine I would say this Internet of Things. So you have Internet of Things, but the key aspect is you can have all these sensors, you can collect all this data, but if you do not make business sense of it, or I mean, if you cannot analyze it with data analytics and then transform that analytics into business talk, that is going to help salespeople. It's going to be very, very hard for the company to be doing this. I'm right now working with a particular company to set up their own, what they call a customer success academy. That is, how can they take, this is a company that does big industrial equipment that sells to mines. So we are talking to them about how they can take all that digital information that they're gathering from their operating parameters. How do we then take it and make it into business parameters? Like how can we improve the productivity of my customer, and then have that kind of a business conversation. So you don't necessarily need to be the nerd. You can be the nerd, and which means that if you're moving and you're going to get those kind of skills, that is fantastic. So you may not be in sales direct, but you're actually helping the salesperson or the customer success professional be successful there as well. So these could be the kind of things that if you say, I want to do, I might want to pivot. If you're very product driven, then understanding data analytics and how it drives product improvements could be a great way how you could be meaningful to your organization as well. If you're looking at AI and everything else, that is also something that you might want to try and keep an open mind towards as well, right? Now, that brings me, so essentially, if you want to say, so we talked about communication. If I want to talk about skills, become omni-channel and be skilled in how do I communicate across different channels. Invest in your own self, invest in digital skills that is going to make you future proof. And of course, the idea is that if you can pivot, don't be like me when we had analytics, where I said, no, analytics is not for me. But the idea is that it could be very, very helpful. Data is the new oil. And essentially, that is something that you really should not lose track of. Which brings me to the last one, is that for those of you who are maybe considering a job in sales or switching to sales, understand one of the best books that you might want to read if you're still doubtful about sales or what it is that there's a book called To Sell is Human. It is by a guy called Daniel Pink. Yes, P-I-N-K, Daniel Pink. It's a great book, essentially, where he makes the case for the fact that we are all in sales. Not that sales is between a customer and somebody who's actually there. The salesperson, on the other hand, is when we go into an interview, we are selling ourselves. When we actually go ask for a budget from our boss, we are selling our ideas across to the other person. So we are constantly selling. So essentially, I really think that we are all in the sales process. So essentially, that's a life skill, is that do not think that sales is something bad. I still remember a friend of mine that I'm talking to right now, another batchmate of mine, and he said, oh, sales it's all about lying to the customer. And I always say, when you think about your personal relationships, are you going to lie? Yes. You may have small lies to get away from your key account who's going to punish you for saying certain things. Again, I'm talking about my key account. But the idea is that what we are talking about is that would you lie to somebody that you care about? And if I'm truly in sales, I would definitely not lie to somebody I care about. I would definitely go out there and try and take a look at how can you get this. So essentially, if in today's day and age, you do lie to your customer, guess what? That customer is not coming back. That customer is going to go all over social media and say horrible things about you. And guess what today? If you truly believe what you hear in the public space, if you take a look at what it is people are saying right now that your customers tend to believe other customers rather than the word of a salesperson. So essentially, if that is the case, be very careful. Everybody's in sales, whether you like it or not, and the same principles can apply here as well. Why do I say everybody's in sales? Well, when I tried to convince my wife that I was the best possible solution for her, she obviously had a need for companionship. Everybody has needs. The question is, do I have the skill set to unearth those needs? And it does not always have to be with the customer. When I want something from my boss, how do I try to understand what his or her needs are? And how do I get those needs? And a lot of times it's also about how well you communicate and how well you listen, because of the fact that a lot of times people might not be telling you what they're thinking. They might not be telling you what they're feeling. They might not be telling you what they're trying to achieve. And what they're trying to achieve might not be what you want. And or they may not be able to articulate. And that's a skill set that you really need to have in terms of bringing it out of people, your ability to make people feel comfortable that they can actually tell you their needs. And that's not an easy thing to do. And if you're good at that, you may not like the term sales, but you are in the aspect of getting people out of the comfort zone, trying to identify the needs and help them out. And the key is it's about empathy. If you think that you can empathize with the people, put yourself in their shoes. It doesn't have to be a customer. It could be somebody internally. It could be in your family. It could be a colleague. It could be a friend. You are in sales. Don't let the term sales sully or the bad reputation that sales has, saying that they would do, salespeople would do anything to get money. True, there are some of them yet, but today customers cannot be fooled. And the idea is that that's something that you can also take away from that. And again, what people also think is that if you have to be really, really, really good in being an extrovert, and you should be good in talking to be in sales. The answer is you should be good in communicating, which, by the way, you ask any communication expert, they'll tell you a big part of communicating effectively is actually listening. And actually, when we teach young students to be in sales, is we always say there's a reason why we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen more. And that is going to help you in every discipline. It does not have to be in sales. The more you listen, the more you hear and pick up things. And now, if you can empathize with the people, you can actually come up with a formulation of how you can actually make and create value in their lives. And the last one, which is actually what I always say, is that they say salespeople is about going and pushing the customer to buy something. And I always say, no, when we are there, the customer should feel that they have control over what they're buying rather than you being sold something to. And a lot of it is the way you communicate is the better you understand the customer's situation. Customer, when I mean customer, I'm talking about the person you're communicating with. The better you can do that, the more you can use your skills to try and see how you can help them out. I think you will be successful. So if you feel that you have this in you, give sales a chance. If you're 3-4 years down in your career and you're in different stages, give sales a chance. And now I'm going to give a shout out to one of my colleagues. I think she's doing great stuff. Is a person with whom I went to university with, is Meena. She's out here, and hopefully someday you can get her to talk about this function called customer success, which is if you feel that the job of a salesperson is to actually get the deal and make the sale. But the key is that once you make a sale, only a part of your job is done. A significant part is what happens afterwards. If you are in a business where your customers need to come back, you need to make sure that you have that same almost profile, even maybe even better profile of going back and interacting with your customers, so that all the promises that salespeople have made, those things can be done by interacting with the customer, by interacting with your internal organizations, and by interacting maybe with even external partners to make it happen. So the job of customer success, and I'm sure Meena will be a great person. So Meena, if I'm saying something wrong, maybe if you don't mind, I just want to get Meena a chance out here.
So thank you, Deva. A couple of things, key things that you said that I want to just build off before I say that about customer success, right? If you are in sales, you develop a relationship. It takes time and effort for that individual, right? You earn your trust with the customer. And this translates across domains. You could be in this job, you could go to a different job later, but you will have an audience. At least you will have that same person that you built the trust with earlier, and you will have a customer for life. That is the kind of relationship you build with that person. And the other thing you also said, salespeople lie. Those days are long gone. If you make a lie and you sell a product, you must be a really good liar. I have to give it to you. But remember, you have to live by that. When I say live by that, the customer, after you sold, you've gotten your bonus and you move on. That's not how it works. You actually have to live by that. When the customer starts using the product, you will be the first person he's going to call. He's not going to call somebody else in the company and say, hey, what happened? You will always be his first point of contact. So make sure you don't lose your credibility anytime. And then there's others who say, I don't want to be in sales, don't want to interact with customers. The one thing I always tell every person in engineering is, remember, it is the customer who pays our bills, right? Indirectly. So you have to always work towards getting what your customer wants. You could be building a top-notch product, and if the customer doesn't want to use it, it's practically useless, right? The CSD role, to your point, is someone who takes you through from the sales cycle all the way to the person going live and being successful with that product through the life of that. So he understands the business, he understands a little bit of technicality of how this product can be used, and also makes that sale into where else it can be used. Maybe there's a different division, maybe you're not using the product properly. There are multiple flavors to a customer success person. It's a very crucial role, very important. So customer, you could always say, this is what the product does. This is what I'm going to do. But that's not what the customer wants to hear. He wants to hear how it will help his business grow. That's the only focus of every company. How are you going to make my business grow? If you don't come up with that solution, it's going to be hard to live by that.
There you go. So as I said, that was a wonderful summary of all the things I've been saying for the past 40 minutes. So I think she hit the nail on the head. Is lying will get you the business once. It's not going to get you business forever. Lying is going to damage your credibility. So what we say when we talk about salespeople, and again, the idea is that why I didn't talk a lot just about sales is that there could be people with different backgrounds here. The term we use is called, you have to become the trusted advisor, right? You have to be the person that people turn to. And that is something you need to actually also live by. You need to make sure that you need to make the right kind of promises. Meena is spot on. At the end of the day, if the salesperson was responsible for bringing the customer in, the first thing that the customer is going to turn to when they have a problem is actually the salesperson. You don't want that salesperson disappearing or suddenly not being reachable. So there are so many things that you should really take into consideration when you take a look at this. And the concept of trusted advisor also becomes critical in terms of why you take a look at this and how you connect people as well. So what do I mean by that is, it is about connections. There is, again, if for those of you who have some time, I know all of you are busy, there's a very nice book, which, again, you might want to consider. It's called Reorganize for Resilience. And it's a book by a guy called Ranjai Gulati. And he talks about customer centricity. And customer centricity, what he talks about is that, hey, we need to make sure that we are, as an organization, kind of organizing ourselves around the problems of the customer, right? And essentially, if that is the case, the biggest issue that you have in many companies when you try to organize around your customer is your organization tends to think in silos. So essentially, I am in marketing, I am in sales, I am in finance, I am in accounting, I am in product management, I am in customer success, if that's a separate department. And each one of them have their own set of what we say KPIs, key performance indicators. And if those don't align, you're going to have a big issue because you will not be able to deliver on your promises to the customer. Or you will hear classical things like, well, the customer is asking this, but can't you go back to your customers and ask them to actually conform to our standards, which is not exactly what the customer wanted. And essentially, what we are trying to say out here is that when you have that kind of mentality, right, even then, a salesperson's role is, how can I go past that? How can I bust the boundaries within my organization? And how do I build those relationships within my organization to help the customer, right? Now, a lot of times, the skill set needed for that is all the things that I talked about: empathy with your fellow colleagues, showing them respect, understand that they are working with their own time frames they're looking at. How do I make sure that if they are going to help me out, what are they going to get in terms of value? Similarly, I should learn to communicate with them. Again, I cannot be with them all the time. I have to communicate with them today with SharePoint or with all the different kind of tools I talked about. And doing all this is a skill set that salespeople have always, people have always talked that salespeople need to do it and need to have it. But I believe that if everybody does it, actually what you're doing is that you're actually contributing to the value that you bring to your firm. You're contributing to the value that you're bringing to the colleagues around you. And more importantly, if you can do this, you're actually creating more value to your customer as an organization that delivers on its promises, thereby making it harder for the customer to leave you. And I believe the word is called churn. And when you do that, your organization is more likely to be successful, and especially during these difficult times. And the reason why I say Reorganize for Resilience is a great book is because in that book, he talks about those kind of companies that have come out successful despite the past recessions. So he gives examples of the past recessions, and he talks about publicly traded companies, about how companies have rallied around the customer to make it happen. But again, if you need that to happen, if you're taking a look at, if at the end of the day, that's your whole organization. If you're stuck in a managerial role, if you're stuck in a sales role, the question is, what can I do from my side to be relevant within my organization? Because let's not forget, tiny drops go on to make a mighty ocean. And the idea is that my actions here could have a lot of implications for how I am seen, perceived by other people. And there's one more thing I kind of want to stop at this point in time, and then let maybe if people have questions, take those questions, is that people be kind to others, because when you're kind to others, yes, there are always going to be the takers in the world, but be kind to others. When you're kind to others, there is always going to be reciprocity. And that's what it is. And I see in LinkedIn, how many times have I actually seen bosses who have had to let go of their people, going on LinkedIn and imploring their contacts to actually say, hey, if you ever need good people, these are great people that you might want to recruit. And they are not going to be doing it for anybody. I've seen another very nice example of one colleague who actually just literally, this person was laid off. Their colleague was laid off, but their colleague had posted something on LinkedIn, and the other person just re-shared it so that all the contacts that this person had could also be now have access to this profile, which normally they did not share connections. If you want that kind of behavior from your colleagues, if you practice some of the things, which I personally believe is what any customer-facing role needs to have. Why do we say customer-facing role? I'm looking at customer service, I'm looking at technical service, I'm looking at sales, pre-sales, and customer success. You already need to be having this. I'm not saying that all of you have it. These are things that you need to have if you want to be successful. For the others who are not in those roles, take a look at how they do it well, and then see how you can do it to become relevant to your organization. And most importantly, if you do this, you'll actually feel, well, given the circumstances, pretty okay. So again, that's pretty much what I wanted to say. I mean, as I said, if this comes out as very jerky, it's probably much harder for me to gauge, because some of you are in sales, some of you are not in sales, some of you are saying, what should I be doing with my career? But again, as I said, these are just hopefully some of the insights that I had. And connect with people. Oh, I forgot to say the last part. Connect with people. And I mean, connect, of course, you need to connect with people at an intellectual level, at a point where you connect there as well, but make sure that you use LinkedIn, connect with as many people as possible. But again, when you connect, please do not immediately, as soon as you connect with somebody, send them something that you want to sell, including your own CV and stuff like your resume, curriculum vitae, whatever it is. But build those connections, because again, those connections could come to help you at a later time. And of course, be a giver, not just a taker. So essentially, if you're there, another tip that I would suggest you do is that if you're going to be active in these kind of forums on LinkedIn and stuff like that, if you have people and you're connected to them, you like it, then make sure that you like their posts, read their posts. Just don't like it, comment a couple of times, so that at least they know that you are paying attention to what they're saying. And guess what? I think somebody mentioned it up there. People like to buy from people they want to work with. I think there is, yeah. So I think Raviraj mentioned it above. He talked about people like to buy from other people like them. There's also something which they say is that apparently people like to buy from people who mimic them. So essentially, that is why we say you mimic them, not making them look like an idiot, but the idea is that, and you're not a monkey either, but the idea is that the more you mimic the people that you're talking to, including the language, that also contributes to them liking you as well. So that is something that I just wanted to say, and I will stop at this point in time.
Thank you.
Later on, yeah, indeed. And Arun, I just want to say that I do a lot of these webinars where I interview people from different companies on different topics, especially about these new digital skills like marketing automation, artificial intelligence for sales, on customer success management and stuff. So all of them are freely available on my YouTube channel. Luckily for you, it's not me talking. Yes, it is me talking, but I'm interviewing somebody else. So you're actually getting industry experts who are sharing some of their insights on these topics. So I will share that. It's not very well organized like a typical academic, but my intention is to go set it up soon so that you can actually see these recorded webinars, which is freely available for everybody.
Yep. So thank you, Professor Deva. So great takeaways from this session. I have like really captured a lot of points that you have shared with us. So I'm going to be sharing this with everybody. So, I think we have like 10 minutes. There are some questions that are coming to you, sir. So
Indeed.
I see a question from Ravi. So how to convince engineers about the importance of building and sustaining relationship through soft skills?
Indeed. I think I am a classical example of a person who went from mechanical engineering into sales. And the misconception that a lot of people have is that you need to have a lot of soft skills. Yes, there are certain things you need to have. But I really think that if you can empathize with your customers, right? And that's not easy for some people. If you can empathize with your customers, if you can actually listen well, gone are the days when you actually need to have a gift of, they call it the gift of gab, right? Can you talk a lot and stuff like that? Gone are the days when that will help. Today, actually, if you try and take a look at it, some of the best salespeople that have gone out of our sales program have been what we would normally think of as introverts. People who, again, do not necessarily come out as, people want to meet other people and stuff like that. But what they had was, they had this tremendous feeling of wanting to help. They took pride in what they did. Second thing, they were great listeners, right? And more importantly is that they were able to take the customer's needs and translate it in a way and communicate back to the customer. And all of these, by the way, are skills that can be learned, right? The key thing to all this is keeping an open mind. And I've talked to recruiter after recruiter. So essentially we have 120 students who in our sales program who actually graduate, and we have to talk to recruiters to get them placed. And when we talk about it, they say, you know what, skill set we will give them in our organization because you have to sell a particular way, the way that your company sells. But give me a person with good attitude and listening skills, and they can actually start making them very, very productive. And I like what Ganesh says out here. Active listening, that's a brilliant one. Active listening, I do not know, Ganesh, from how you look at active listening. The way we talk about it in our classes, active listening is listening to the customer, listening the key, internalizing it, then coming up with how can we actually give an answer back. And it also means sometimes is that it may take some time for you to give your answer back. You don't always have to have constant talking, and that is active listening. And essentially, that is something that is trainable. There are people who say salespeople are born. I believe salespeople are made. And if that is the case, those skills that can be learned can be translated across to every other function within an organization. And that is what is going to happen. And at some point in time, again, given this, when I was coming out, I went into sales because at the end of the day, I just was looking for a job. I just wanted to earn money. But when you have so many other choices, sales can be a great career choice. It is with the skills that can be trained, but go with an open mind and an attitude of learning, of looking at things. And if you have that attitude, you will be successful. And I'll tell you why. For those of you who are young and are looking at graduating right now, especially if you're doing an MBA at our business school and you feel that, oh, I did not come to do an MBA to be in sales. Guess what? when you go to the interview, what are you selling? The most prized commodity ever, your brain. So essentially, everybody is in sales. That's what I go back and say all the time. And you go with an open mind, and don't forget that when you're in sales, and if you do it well, you get noticed very fast, because the way and the effort that you put in, if it ends up in a sale, everybody is going to be happy because you're actually making money for the company. When the customer is asking a question that is difficult, you have to go and reach out to people within your organization who can help you with that, which means you get known within your organization. Now, when that happens, you have two choices. Either you can be an asshole about it, or you can be nice to people. And if you're nice to people, you'll see that that also comes to help you be successful. You get noticed much faster. And in some cases, you also get compensated more. Yes, there could be traveling, but the upside is that you can always get noticed. And more importantly, you will build bridges within your organization that's going to help you. And the second thing is, just because you start in sales does not mean that you're going to end up in sales, right? So essentially, you are going to go across. I think if you try and take a look at any organization, I say, do not be afraid of sales. The second thing is, if you want to move up, get some kind of basics in finance, because those are the kind of things which will never go out of fashion. And then when you're in sales, of course, a new way of selling, of course, but finance is, if you truly want to move up within the organization, understanding finance is going to be very, very critical. So hopefully that answers the question there.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Deva. So another question from me, so I just wanted to check and ask, in this time, do you see a shift in business leaders and entrepreneurs dedicating their company's growth through conscious capital?
Yeah. So essentially, this is I'll be very, very careful. You see a mixed bag out here, right? So you see a mixed bag because there's this one guy, I forget his name. He already made a splash a couple of years ago, where at least in the United States, I can only talk about what he did there. He said all of his employees need to have $70,000 as minimum wage, right? Now, for me, the fact is that when you do that, and again, some people would always say that's a ploy, that's to try and make a lot of things, but apparently he's stuck by it. He's got a recent book that has come out as well. I should go check his name. But the idea is that for me is a kind of conscious capitalism where, listen, capitalism is not always bad, as long as you realize is that we also have a commitment to society. We also have to make sure that people within my organization have to be successful, right? Because if my people within my organization, let's say, for example, you let go of 20 people, you're an organization of 50 people and you let go of 20. Couple of things. One is the workload of the 20 people still stays, at least to a certain extent. So which means 30 people now might have to do the job of 50. You're putting more stress on those people. You're letting a feeling of uncertainty tide over everybody. And guess where it spills out to? Either it spills out to a lot of workplace behaviors that leads to a lot of stress, or it could spill out to customers who suddenly feel that they're not getting the kind of support because people are anxious. I recently did an interview with a professor from IMT Ghaziabad, which is Institute of Management Technology at Ghaziabad. And this was posted on LinkedIn on Friday, where he talks about salesperson anxiety. So the actions of your CEOs and all the big companies and the entrepreneurs has ripple effects on how your people behave. And that will then reflect on how they end up in their dealings, both internally as well as with the customers. And that could lead to a toxic culture within your organization. Toxic, either people are not nice to each other, or people are so anxious they don't help each other. And that also results in what they do with their customers. So I think conscious capitalism, if done well, can be good. For example, for those of you, again, my apologies if you're not from the United States, there is Outback Steakhouse, where the CEO recently said that apparently that he is going to take a pay cut, and I think members of the board also do not get paid this year. But none of the people will be laid off. And more importantly, they would actually get one-time meals as well. Now that is leadership from the front. When you have, as I said, Mark Benioff come and say that no people are going to be laid off for the next 90 days. Again, those are the kind of things where you set the right example. And I believe in India as well, when I was talking to this professor from IMD, he said very interesting things. Is that when you have these kind of difficult things, the morale of the people are down, but it's just not the actions that you do, but even simple things like how your CEO shows support for his or her team by tweeting, by sharing things on LinkedIn is going to go a long way towards making sure that his or her people feel that their bosses are listening to them. But of course, saying one thing is great, but not putting it in action is a different story altogether. So it's a long-winded answer, but I think yes, it can be done well. There are examples of it, but yeah, I should be very careful there as well. Dan Price, thank you, Gopi. It's Dan Price. Yes.
Yeah. Got
indeed.
it. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think we are at the top of the hour, but we have one question from Sridhar and said, what kind of capstone or mini projects in sales and marketing we can give to engineering students, say mechanical?
Yes. Exactly. So I will. So essentially, one of the companies which I did a lot of training for, which I continue doing training for, is one of the business units of a company called Atlas Copco. Atlas Copco is a company that makes compressors. Right? It's a Swedish company, headquartered out of Sweden, Stockholm. And for 14 years, I've been training every year one of the divisions on the basics of marketing and sales. Right. But what comes out when you come up with all these ideas is that you see that all of these companies actually have issues like, for example, in many B2B companies like these, they have a marketing department, but not marketing as we know it, but essentially something that just does marketing communication. We call it Marcom. They just do Marcom, but they don't do the actual things like how do I segment my markets? How do I try and take a look at what is the best way to go to market? That is, how do I bring my sales force? How do I manage my distributors? All these could be projects which they don't have internal capacity to do. But then what do? They might reach out to local business schools to get young aspiring students who might be cheaper than going to a Deloitte or cheaper than going to a PwC or KPMG from the consulting side. So what you can do is that you can actually give them as 2 or 3 month projects, and the typical projects would be market assessment, customer needs assessment. What kind of go-to-market strategies? Go-to-market is how do I bring my products and solutions into the hands of the customers? And these are all things like you can actually be put into place. They can be part of internships, or they could be actually paid projects as well. So in my previous job, we had it as paid projects. The students would almost be acting as consultants, guided by a faculty member. And that could be something that will give a lot of students a skill set necessary, at least from the marketing and the sales management side of things. But I really think if you want the people to develop sales skills, we have helped set up sales competitions, sales role play competitions, where we work with companies and we write a fictitious role play, and the students have to go through and try to sell and go through the steps of a sales process, and they are kind of evaluated by the companies, and we have, this is the champion or this is the first prize, but it's also a great recruitment tool as well. So there are sales skills and there's marketing and sales management skills as well. They're two different things. So you can actually bring it in, and if it's a faculty member who's talking about this, I think we can definitely talk about this offline. Because I can share with you how business schools in different parts of the world and different parts of are also doing it as well.
Yep.
Indeed. And I think there was one point earlier, Gopi, where you said, talking about, to summarize what I said, I'll summarize what I have done in a kind of a couple of PowerPoint slides and send it across to everybody. But I think if you mentioned, if we have a couple of minutes, I think there's a question from Gopi above, or a statement from Gopi above. If you can summarize something. Yes. So for my part, I'll summarize it. If Meena is still there, maybe she wants to say a couple of words. I really think that what she says is absolutely spot on, and I cannot specify enough how much I agree with what she says. So I don't know if Meena, so there you go. I'll mute myself.
So what is the question? Is this about the course in engineering communication?
No, this is more about the point where the key things that I said, remember you were talking about why it is important to take a look at not lying to a customer and making sure that end to end you meet the requirements, and how do you make sure that you bring it in. What you had said earlier, I think those are the key things that Gopi wanted. Huh?
Yeah. So basically, to summarize what I said earlier, you cannot go far with lying. Data is extremely crucial. So listening to the customer, like Deva and others said earlier, listening to the customer, internalizing that, and you don't have to give a quick response right away. You have to think about it, see what it is, and how you can help the customer. That is key. Because you could have, you could launch your rocket in the moon, but that's not what the customer is interested in. So you basically have to find a way to tell the customer and address the question he has, right? So that is very key. Internalizing, working with your internal partners, with engineering or product, and see how you can provide that answer. It may not be a quick one, but try and find that response to the customer. The other thing that is key is make sure that when you made this sale, don't leave that customer hanging, right? You continue to stay in touch, make sure they're happy, make sure they continue that success. That's what I call success. Customer success is what it is. It's not that you do a sale and you're done, you got your bonus, you're out of the door, right? You continue to make sure that you make the customer successful, because that gives you a relationship for lifetime, not just individually, but for the company as well. Say, for example, in my company, the biggest businesses that we make are through referrals. When you make one customer happy, you build multiple relationships, and then the executives in their team will say, hey, this is the sales guy who made this. He listened to us. He made that sale. Why don't you try this product? So those are key sales for us in the business. So keeping your customer happy, keeping that relationship, and getting that referral. And every customer who's happy will always give you that referral. So you can count on that. So and it doesn't end with that. You have to make them go live, help them with being live, being in production support. So hold that hand till that end of the journey, until it's business as usual, the customer is happy, and then that's basically what it is for you.
Yeah, thank you, Meena, for summarizing it. And I'd like to hand it over to Venkatesh for closing remarks. Venkatesh, over to you.
Sure. Yes. Good afternoon and good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending this interesting session. I know personally Deva when I was a freshman in college and he was a senior. And in fact, I followed him when I landed in my first job in Houston, and he was finishing up his PhD.
So, indeed.
Yeah, so we are connecting online now, and he has been a great mentor and resource even before he became a professor. And with this 15 years of experience from across the pond and coming over here, especially a salesman is something where you remember certain names and you're able to pitch and emphasize in that elevator level speech. You have a 2-minute pitch that you need to gather your audience attention. Some of the key things that we learned in today's session was related to data analytics, regarding omni-channel communication and customer success. And from Meena, what we understood was that lying can get you a sale for one time, but it is not going to have a repeat customer coming back to you. And you need to have that end-to-end from soup to nuts, as they call it, in ensuring that we are able to deliver what we promise, and most importantly, have a follow-up to see what their satisfaction and their levels in implementation of the project or the product that you sell to them. And some of the key interesting book to follow up and read on is Daniel Pink's To Sell is Human. I think so every one of us need to go back, either download it, a Kindle version or an ebook version, and read that. Because for budding entrepreneurs like myself, as well as in our VIT team where we act as a mentor, we need to give that pitch to the folks in terms of how it can be developed. So my alma mater has come up in this COVID-19 with a new test that can rapidly analyze samples and provide if a patient is COVID positive or not. And yes, the engineers work and they produce wonders, and scientists work in the background, but still the customer facing or the consumer facing aspect is done by the sales force, how they give the pitch to the patient for them to accept it. So it starts with family, and it includes a lot of emotional intelligence and empathy. And then it extends to our friend circle, and any good deed gets repaid. And I'm here as a successful entrepreneur, thanks to the well wishes of Professor Deva Rangarajan. And it's a relationship that has been continuing on for more than 3 decades.
And I just want to say one last thing, couple of things as well, is that I typed in my LinkedIn, my link to my YouTube channel. So it's somewhere up there. So it's essentially, I'm just going to type it one more time. I'll send it to you by email. That's probably better. And I just want to leave you with something that at the end of the day is that when we talk about listening to customers and empathizing with the customers, thank you, Gopi, is that I remember Philips, which is a very well-known company, and about how they have actually reinvented themselves every time. I remember the first time when I heard about Philips, their slogan was very interesting. The slogan was the first one was, let's make things better. That was written by a very engineering driven company where you want to provide a fantastic product. Whether the customer uses it well or gets benefit from it, they don't really care. Then they they listened to marketing and sales, and they went the other way. The next slogan they had was sense and simplicity. We're going to listen to the market and do everything according to what the market has. And what they realized very soon was that the market wanted a lot of things, but when you actually came up with the product, they didn't want to buy it. So what they do right now, it's called innovation and you. And that I love that because it essentially plays to their strengths, but it's what strengths I have and how do I then translate it into something that I can help you, dear customer, with. And that is something that you really need to keep in mind. And I think whether you're in sales or in any function, if you have that mindset is, how can I use my capabilities without not going out of my comfort zone? Yeah, you have to go out of your comfort zone a little bit, but the idea is that I have to be true to myself. I think that's what I want to say. You have to be true to yourself. If you're true to yourself and you really want to help somebody, that is where you're going to be successful. That's going to be a sweet spot, because that is pretty much where you will be making a meaningful contribution to those around you. And I think that's pretty much what it is. And again, this BSU Sales Center, again, you need to be patient. I'm very bad at organizing stuff, but there's a lot of content, around 40 different interviews that I've done with different people on different topics, from marketing automation, artificial intelligence for sales, customer success even. So essentially, feel free to use it, connect with me, connect with the people out here. And again, thank you all for giving me the chance. Thank you, Satish, Arun, Venkat, VGS, Doctor. So all of you, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Deva. Appreciate it.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
Okay, bye.